There is one genre in gaming that seems to attract the most degenerates.
There's been like a dead rat in my house for like the past 3 days.
And who gets that reward, you might be wondering? Well, it is of course the massively multiplayer online community, famous for having players who will grind 10 hours a day just so they can see their XP bar go up by the length of a gnat's cock. A genre dedicated to players being able to interact with one another socially and online. What could possibly go wrong? In today's video, we'll be taking a look at some of the more outrageous and disturbing stories from some of your favourite MMOs. If you're not familiar with the iceberg concept, it's simply this: the deeper you go on the iceberg, the more dark and disturbing it will get. A majority of these stories do pertain to real-life crime, so viewer discretion is advised. Be warned though, some of these tales aren't very mainstream and you might be surprised by what happens. In May 2008, a Japanese woman was arrested and charged for killing her husband's avatar in MapleStory. It was said that the motivation behind killing the avatar was due to her husband's obsessive gaming habits. Although it's not illegal to kill other players in-game, it is when you do it in the form of logging on with their details and deleting their character. The Japanese woman was arrested on suspicion of illegally accessing a computer and manipulating electronic data, which can carry a fine of up to $5,000 and even jail time. The result of the investigation is not clear, but some sources state she didn't go to prison, and in the end, the outcome was somewhat lenient, as the authorities viewed the matter as more of a psychological issue rather than a criminal one. A stark reminder as to why you shouldn't share your password details with anyone, especially your wife. On a slightly more lighter note, the next story involves tax fraud. Zhengtu Online is an Eastern Asian fantasy MMORPG. It is also the first MMO to have loot box mechanics, and as you can imagine, there was a lot of pay to win. Chu was a government accountant in the Nanking region in China. He used to like to spend his money on Zhengtu until one day when he realized that why use his own money when he can use taxpayers' money to fund his Zhengtu habit. Chu couldn't help himself and even at one point spent $2,000 on one gift to another player. He even boosted 2 of his accounts to elite status, which apparently cost a lot of money. But in 2012, his life would fall apart. He divorced his wife, had a lot of problems at work, and Zhengtu became too boring for him. When checking how much money he had spent on Zhengtu, he was shocked to see the amount, which was $500,000. More interestingly, this occurred over the span of 6 years without anyone noticing. Chu, who was embarrassed by his actions, decided to turn himself in to the police. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison for embezzlement. The real crime here was spending that much money on such a shit game. It's hard to believe that a MMO can be permanently deleted, but that's precisely what happened with Japanese MMO M2. Developed by Sakando and published by Handgame, it was a fairly simple MMO with a lot of microtransactions. According to official reports, during some maintenance to fix a server issue, some crucial code which wasn't backed up was deleted. This amateur mistake has led many people to believe that this was actually done intentionally. The rumour goes that Handgame had purposely deleted M2, one of its weaker performing titles, in order to legally break contract with Sakando. Both companies deny this allegation. Let's pray that the next time this happens, it's to a game that deserves it, like The Elder Scrolls Online or New World. This next layer is where things get a little bit more spicy. And if you do want to see more content like this, then give this video a like. If it gets over 1069 likes, I'll make another iceberg video. The Sims Online was EA's attempt at making The Sims into a MMORPG. Released in 2002, this title is older than World of Warcraft. The game was a social MMO with a twist, because you had a reputation bar which other Sims could actively affect. For instance, if they thought you were nice and trustworthy, they can give you a positive review and therefore giving you a green reputation. And if they didn't like you, they could give negative feedback and therefore give you a red reputation, which would have in-game consequences. Why does this feel oddly familiar? Being marked as untrustworthy made it harder for player interaction, renting houses, or participating in community events. The system worked so well that it caused other players to start extorting one another. So how exactly did the extortion work? Well, it's simple. You had a group or a family of Sims who would approach players and give them the ultimatum of give me all your money or be forever downvoted and a red player, which was how the original Sims Mafia was created. Players working together to game the reputation system, because not only could they give bad reputation, they could also give good reputation. And that's where things start to go one step further. Players start to realise how they could exploit certain mechanics of the game, causing different factions to start to form, as well as different businesses. Players start to think outside the box as to how they can make money in game, and things got worse and worse. In particular, people who like to ERP were given a place to do it in exchange for in-game currency. In other words, an online brothel. On paper, this seems harmless until you go deeper, and the most popular of these ERP houses was actually ran by an underage player, who also hired other underage players to work in the establishment. And these are just some of the stories that we know about. The Sims ran from 2002 to 2008, where it was closed down, which also spelled the end of the first ever child-ran online child ring in an online game. I'm pretty sure that's one for the Guinness World Record books. If you're not familiar with Second Life, it's a social MMO which allows players to live out their wildest fantasies, and is notorious for many reasons and will appear later on the iceberg.
It's kind of putting off weird vibes anyway.
I know, right?
However, this version was specifically aimed at teenagers between the age of 13 to 17 and was named Teen Second Life. It was a like-for-like of the original Second Life, however this one had stricter rules and monitoring to ensure a safe and appropriate experience for minors. But despite all this, inappropriate content still made its way to Teen Second Life. This included sexually suggestive avatars, inappropriate conversations, and adult-themed creations. Amazingly, if you are between the ages of 13 and 17, you don't tend to have any ID, so realistically, there was no real age verification, which meant the keys to the kingdom were pretty much open to anyone and everyone. It's also worth noting, because of the style of MMO that Second Life is, there are a lot of in-game virtual relationships. So imagine having a game focused at 13 to 17-year-olds where you can't actually verify their age, and you also welcome online relationships.
I wanted to ask you to a party.
I'm 13.
Oh, right.
And she's 11, you nonce.
Due to the ongoing concerns and difficulty managing Teen Second Life, Linden Lab pulled the plug in 2010, although officially they state it as they merged the two worlds together, which somehow seems worse. Our next controversy takes us all the way back to China. This story was published by The Guardian back in 2011, and the article writes about how a Chinese prisoner was forced to play World of Warcraft in order to help with a gold farming operation. During the day, prisoners were forced to do hard labour, and by the evening they were forced to go and farm for gold. A statement from one of the prisoners read as follows: "There were 300 prisoners forced to play games. We worked 12-hour shifts in the camp. I heard them say they could earn 5,000 to 6,000 yen a day. We didn't see any of the money. The computers were never turned off. If I couldn't complete my work quota, they would punish me physically. They would make me stand with my hands raised in the air, and after I returned to my dormitory, they would beat me with plastic pipes. We kept playing until we could barely see things." That was a direct quote from 54-year-old Liu Dali, who was sentenced to 3 years at a correction camp for illegally petitioning the central government about corruption in his hometown. A majority of people will view this as another example of China abusing human rights, whereas some WoW players will view this and view it as an average day.
Played for the game right now, 1,149 days. So multiply that by 24, and that's how long I played one character.
In 2012, a 19-year-old Josh Pilar played Runescape and got into a bit of an argument with another player. During this argument, Josh made some edgy off-the-cuff threats, which would then end up landing him in prison for 6 years.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So what exactly do you have to do as a 19-year-old playing RuneScape to get the FBI knocking on your door and taking you to prison? During this exchange, one told the other to commit suicide, which then escalated into Josh saying he would level local Mississippi high school Oxford High, and alluded to the Columbine shootings and said he could not wait to blow brains out of skulls. 4 days later, after the altercation, the FBI turned up at Josh's front door. He was charged with knowingly and willfully communicating a threat by means of the internet. This landed him 6 years in prison. Who could have guessed that threats of a school shooting would be taken so seriously by the FBI? When Josh was released from prison, he did make a response video. In it, he doesn't deny the threats they made, and on reflection, he says, "I trolled him, went as hard as I could to get a reaction out of him, and I accidentally made the government very, very upset. I do not and have never had any intention of killing a human being." All of this could have been avoided if he had just simply put "lol JK" at the end of his sentence. You might be wondering how a game like Hello Kitty Online gets on a Iceberg video. Well, the answer might surprise you. Hello Kitty Online was a non-offensive, colourful MMO predominantly aimed at children. Released back in 2009, the player base was mostly between 10 and 16, with any microtransactions needing permission from mum and dad. In 2015, Hello Kitty Online had a massive data breach where 3.3 million user account details were exposed. The details included name, gender, country, email address, and password information. The Japanese firm Sanrio, which owns Hello Kitty, said it had now closed the loophole. They also claimed that no information had been stolen. According to reports, information of more than 180,000 children was in this cache. No credit card or payment information was held on the vulnerable server. Sanrio added that it was conducting an internal investigation and review to find out why the server were misconfigured so they could be accessed. Despite the claims by Sanrio to say that no data had been lost, they still sent out a message to all their members telling them that they should probably change their passwords. Chris Vickery, the researcher who uncovered the access to the data, disputed Sanrio's claims that no membership data had been accessed. He said he used many different net addresses to access the data and can confirm it was vulnerable. It's not entirely known either as to how long these details were accessible for, but given the lack of care and due diligence around this personal information, I'd sooner be sending my children to Epstein Island than Hello Kitty Island. Although it wouldn't surprise me if Epstein owned both of them.
Butters, you said you're on your computer all the time.
Yeah, but I'm playing Hello Kitty Island Adventure.
We're once again back to China for our next iceberg story. This one involves a 24-year-old man named Wu Tai, and he was in an internet cafe in Shanghai. The man was believed to be addicted to video games, and in particular World of Warcraft. And it was during a 19-hour gaming session at an internet cafe that he suffered from a heart attack and died. CCTV footage shows him sitting in front of a computer and suddenly turning to his left to cough violently as shocked fellow gamers watch on. His coughing fit continues before he suddenly slumps in his chair and becomes unresponsive. A fellow gamer in the cafe said, "I suddenly heard him groan, and when I turned to see what had happened, he was very pale and looked uncomfortable. He was dabbing his mouth with a hanky which had blood on it. I asked him if he was okay, and he said he had felt better, but that he would be okay. I called for an ambulance while my friend went to get some help from staff, but while we waited, he just died in front of us, and there was nothing the staff could do. When medical crews arrived, they tried to resuscitate Wu, but he is already dead." A police spokesman said an autopsy will determine the cause of death, but it seems little doubt his playing on the computer for 19 hours instead of resting contributed to his death. It was never officially confirmed what was the cause of death, but it's believed that Wu might have been ill before his gaming session. Either way, not moving for 19 hours is not healthy and can cause all sorts of complications, such as blood clots and high blood pressure. Or just stick to 18-hour gaming sessions. I feel like World of Warcraft could have its very own iceberg. But anyway, back to today's story, which takes place in Ontario, Canada. Jordan Osborne was sat at home relaxing when he heard yelling coming from his neighbour's house. It sounded like some sort of argument. Jordan went round to his neighbour's house to investigate and potentially calm him down, which is when the altercation and incident happened with Justin Williams. When retelling the story, Jordan stated the following: I heard him having an argument with someone in his apartment on Wednesday and went round to make sure everything was okay. He was yelling at his buddies on his computer because they actually attacked him. He's yelling at them because they invaded him, they rushed into his area and destroyed it, and he just started freaking out. I was telling him, there's no need for you to be freaking out about World of Warcraft, it's just a game. At which point Justin replied, it's not just a game, it's my life. At which point Osborne was grabbed by the throat, punched, and then had a short knife plunged into his chest. According to police, Williams was arrested and charged with aggravated assault and assault with a weapon. And as for Osborne, he survived the ordeal and received treatment for his wound at Peterborough Regional Health Centre. On reflection, Osborne said, the doctor said he could fit his whole finger in my chest. If it had been a little further over, it could have hit my heart or my lungs. I was sitting in my house today thinking, should I be dead or shouldn't I? And it's all over a World of Warcraft game. It's true, it takes over your life. On the bright side, because this incident did take place in Canada, it meant that no one got shot, and everyone apologised to each other afterwards. Like the great philosophers of gaming past once said,
it's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
In 2024, Edward Kang flew to Florida to attack a fellow gamer with a hammer. He is charged with attempted second-degree murder and armed burglary with a mask. And what game were the two players disputing over, you might be wondering? Well, it was of course ArcheAge. You know, that MMO that was so popular that the US servers closed down, although technically it still has the Asian servers, so there is some life to it, I guess. But anyway, I digress. Kang flew from New Jersey to Jacksonville, Florida, after telling his mother that he was going to visit a friend that he had met while playing a video game. He purchased a hammer at a local hardware store and then made his way to the victim's house. He arrived at 2 AM and the door was unlocked. The victim was walking out of his bedroom when he was confronted by Kang, who hit him on the head with the hammer. The two struggled as the victim called for help. His stepfather responded and helped to restrain Kang until police arrived. The victim suffered several head wounds that were not considered life-threatening. He received staples at the hospital. Once in custody, Kang told investigators that the victim is a bad person online. He also asked deputies how much jail time people get for breaking and entering an assault. To which they replied, I would say, Mr. Kang, it's going to be a long time before you play video games again. It's a shame he didn't commit this crime in China. He would have at least still got to play video games. Now, considering that no one died, you might be wondering why this is so far down on the iceberg. So here's my reasoning. Number 1, who gets that angry over a dead and irrelevant MMO? There's literally zero clout to be gained here. How do you get that batshit crazy that you track down someone's address and travel literally hundreds of miles by plane on a 10-hour flight to confront someone you've never met before? They literally could have been 6'8" and a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Number 3, and the thing that escalates it even more, in a country full of guns, they went to a hardware store to pick up a hammer so they could scramble the other person's brains. That feels very personal, in my opinion. And finally, to claim the other person is a bad person online. Like, how bad are we talking? What's the story here? So bad that they had to die? That just sounds crazy. And to anyone wondering, I myself am 7 foot tall, really muscly, and I know Kung Fu. And I live on a boat in the middle of the ocean. Our next story brings us back to 2001, where Sean Woody committed suicide over Everquest. What makes this story so infamous is that it was probably one of the first recorded cases of video game addiction, and sadly it ended in an individual taking their own life, which was the first ever recorded case of death by MMO. In an interview with Liz Woolley, who was Sean's mother, she had the following things to say about Sean. She was especially proud of his accomplishments because she says Sean struggled with learning disabilities and significant emotional problems, but last year he got a job and a new apartment. She did all she could do to help him find his way, but it wasn't enough. Sean, who was 21 at the time, was found in front of his desk with Everquest on his screen, and he had shot himself on Thanksgiving. His mother had the following to say: "That damn game, he shot himself because of the game." She says he was completely addicted to it. He may have had other problems, but she thinks Everquest pushed him over the edge. He couldn't stay off it. That's how strong that game is. You can't just get up and walk away. In the end, she says the game became his life. She guesses that something terrible happened in game to a character called I Love You, a rejection or betrayal, something that crushed him. He was so upset, and then I was trying to talk to him about it, and I said, "Well, Sean, you know those aren't people, they're not real people." He was so upset. I mean, he wasn't angry, he was hurt. When the producers of the game Sony Online were questioned about Woolley's death, John Smedley, the CEO, had this to say: "When I spoke with Miss Woolley, I expressed my condolences, and it's really one of those terrible things that happened, and there's just nothing to suggest that Everquest had any role in his death. Everquest is a game, and I don't see any connection between a form of entertainment and somebody's tragic suicide." According to Smedley, calling Everquest addictive is nonsense. It's entertainment. Is a book dangerous? Is a TV show dangerous? I think the answer is no. People need to take responsibility and say, hey, you know, this is too much. Enough is enough. It's a game. Liz also had this to say: "I think the way the game is written is that when you first start playing, it is fun and you make great accomplishments. And then the further you get into it, the higher the level you get, the longer you have to stay on it to move onward. And then it isn't fun anymore. But by then you're addicted and you can't leave it. Late last fall, Sean stopped working, he stopped seeing his family. I think that was the beginning of the end. He quit cleaning his place and he wouldn't let anybody in." Liz Woolley would go on to set up a website called Everquest Widows, a site devoted to people who think that their partners and spouses have become obsessed with the game. Liz Woolley went on to try and sue Sony Online, and even went as far to try and get them to put warning labels on the game boxes. In the end, the lawsuit did not result in any significant legal changes regarding game labeling or regulations. However, it did contribute to ongoing discussions about the social and psychological effect of immersive online gaming. It's worth noting that Everquest was jokingly referred to as Evercrack by the MMO community, and that was before Sean's death. Second Life is a social MMO where players can live out their wildest fantasies, and sometimes those fantasies are very questionable, and some come in the form of age play. Age play in itself refers to role-playing activity where users take on the persona of characters who are significantly younger or older than their real-life age. This can include playing as children, teenagers, or elderly individuals, often for storytelling, family dynamics, or community-based roleplay. However, when it comes to Second Life, it's been known to go a bit further.
I love you, honey. You have sweet, wonderful dreams.
Is that an old man pretending to be a child?
You know what? Who the f*** are you?
Sorry, I just walked in. It's kind of strange what I'm seeing right now.
If you don't like it, go fuck off.
The issue with Second Life is that there is a lot of sexual content, and the fact that you have the ability to make your avatar a child, it just acts as an enabler for these people who go out looking for that sort of content. And what makes it worse is that it's not hidden, it's pretty much in plain sight.
It's like a school.
There's a little RP classroom in there, yeah.
Slave girl.
A lot of traffic, so yeah. Come on.
Wait, what is this?
You're probably talking about a little rental area. It's set up so that people can have a lot of privacy.
Okay, it's for people that want to have privacy?
Yeah, people who want to rent them.
In my first playthrough of Second Life, within the first couple of minutes, I saw someone who had a very, very questionable avatar. And what can I say? So far, nothing to Okay, that's slightly disturbing.
I'm getting the word nonce.
So yeah, only a couple minutes in, and I've already witnessed someone trying to roleplay as a small child. What is this, Black Desert Online? Believe it or not, there are people who will defend this sort of content, even though it is literally illegal. In the US, anything depicting such acts is considered illegal. Everywhere in Europe and Australia sees this as illegal, and there has even been arrests in Germany. It's very clear cut what is wrong and what is right. But if you play Second Life, I promise you, it wouldn't take you that long to run into this sort of content. In 2014, a LA couple were found guilty of child abuse, false imprisonment, and delinquency charges. They had 2 children in their care who they clearly didn't want to look after, and the reason for that was that they were too busy playing World of Warcraft. The girls 5 and 10 were in a really bad state when they were found. It was not stated what relationship these adults had with the children, but what we know is that when the children were found, they had matted hair, damaged teeth beyond repair, and their feet were crusted with dirt. The unemployed couple just sat around playing World of Warcraft all day, whilst the children were left to their own devices in the mobile home. And this occurred between 2010 and 2013. In the LA Times article, it was stated that investigators found kitchen appliances covered in mold and cobwebs, stacks of trash, debris, mold, and feces throughout the home, a pile of used condoms under a stuffed teddy bear, and an inoperable toilet. The girls were not allowed out the home and did not attend school. It was only after years of abuse that a neighbour called police and the couple were eventually prosecuted. This isn't the only time a child has been neglected due to World of Warcraft. There have been similar cases all around the world, and usually the children are taken into care before anything can happen. Although unfortunately, that is not always the case. In 2010, a South Korean couple were arrested for allowing their 3-month-old baby to starve to death. The couple were said to be addicted to a game called Prius online. They had devoted quite a lot of time to this fantasy MMO RPG, so much so that they were even raising virtual children. They were so addicted that they would spend all night in internet cafes playing this title, whilst leaving their newborn child at home to sleep. They would occasionally pop home to feed their child powdered milk. Chun Jing-won, a police officer, stated the couple seemed to have lost their will to live a normal life because they didn't have jobs and gave birth to a premature baby. They indulged themselves in the online game of raising a virtual character so as to escape from reality, which led to the death of their real baby. The couple who met online were actually expecting a second child, which had an effect on the court case and the sentencing, as the mother was given a suspended sentence and the father was only given a 2-year sentence. In 2011, a mother was jailed for 25 years for allowing her child to starve to death while she played World of Warcraft. Rebecca Colleen Christie was an unemployed mum who was addicted to World of Warcraft. She would sit at her desk all day playing, whilst her child Brandy, who was 3 years old, starved to death. In the Daily Mail article, it was reported that the child was so hungry that she would resort to eating cat litter and cat food. Doctors said that she was so malnourished that over the last year of her life, she had only gained 1 pound. It was reported when she was taken into medical care, she only weighed 23 pounds, with the average 3-year-old weighing 30. Christie was the wife of an Air Force sergeant, and she lived on base with her husband in New Mexico. Christie called paramedics when she found her daughter limp and unconscious. Doctors were unable to save the toddler, who had been allowed to wither away as her mother played the online game with friends. It was reported that the husband would come home from work and regularly find that the child had no water, and his wife just sat at the computer playing World of Warcraft. According to the attorney's office, there was no food in the house smelt of cat urine, and the litter box was overflowing. Before her sentencing, Chrissy was sobbing and full of remorse as she was sentenced to 25 years. Her now ex-husband pleaded guilty to child neglect and faced up to 3 years in prison. This next case is so infamous that a documentary was made about it called Perfect World, A Deadly Game. In 2019, Menhaz Zaman murdered his whole entire family and then bragged about it on Discord. In the run-up to the murders, Menhaz had been a long-time player of Perfect World, which is a fantasy MMO RPG with traditional Chinese settings. Over time, he had started to develop quite the friend circle and had bonded with quite a lot of people. His online friends only knew him as Menhaz. As much as it being his first name, it was also his gamer tag. Friends of Menhaz would describe him as a harmless troll, but in his last year, he was a bit more dark in his humour and even got into trouble and had his account suspended due to racist remarks. Before the murders, he did say he was going to kill his family, but most people just thought it was part of his edgy, dark humour. In an interview with Vice, one of his friends said that they woke up to a message from Menhaz which read, "I just slaughtered my entire family and will most likely spend the rest of my life in jail if I manage to survive. I hope I made you laugh at one point or another. I hope you remember the good times. I will miss you all." When his friend replied, "What? I just woke up," Menhaz replied with, "I'm sorry, do you want the pics?" He then sent a collection of photos which allegedly depicted his family members lying dead on the ground covered in blood with their throats cut. Menhaz would then go on to send the pictures to other members of his friend circle who, as you can imagine, were quite taken back. The only thing these friends had in common was that they once played Perfect World together, and now all of a sudden they were being shown messages of an explicit nature and essentially now being part of a murder investigation. The friends all started reaching out to each other to try and understand what was going on and what just happened. And it was at this point they had the shocking revelation that he did indeed kill his family. Over the next couple of hours, these friends would try and figure out who Menhaz was and who exactly to report this to. When the first initial messages were sent, the murders were still ongoing. He said that he still needed to kill his sister, who'd be home in 5 minutes, and his dad, who'd be home in an hour. At the time, the friend circle tried to frantically reach out to anyone who might know Menhaz or someone who could report the crime to his local authorities. Unfortunately, the friends couldn't act in time, and Menhaz began to message numerous people with a similar message stating, "I just slaughtered my entire family." They tried to track down his IP address but had no real luck. Eventually, the group got lucky because Menhaz started asking people for their PayPal accounts so he could send them money because he figured he wouldn't need it anymore. And in doing so, he ended up giving away his personal information, which led the group to be able to contact the police and eventually apprehend Menhaz. Menhaz ended the conversation with, "The police are here, goodbye." When police arrived at the scene, they found the dead bodies of his mother, his grandmother, his sister, and his father. As to why he murdered his whole family, it was simply because he had dropped out of college and was ashamed. He told his parents they'd be graduating in July, which was a fabricated lie. In September 2020, he pleaded guilty to 3 accounts of first-degree murder and 1 account of second-degree murder. Menhaz was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of his entire family and is not eligible for parole for at least 40 years. That concludes today's Iceberg, which was based on the dark side of MMOs. If you got this far in the video, I really appreciate your support, and if you want to help me further, by all means, leave a like and maybe subscribe. Hopefully you found the video entertaining, if not somewhat educational. Feel free to leave any comments below if there's any additional information to any of the stories told today, or if you have a better one that should be on the iceberg. Hopefully you wasn't too traumatized, and if we do get this video to 1069 likes, I'll make sure the next iceberg is a bit more light-hearted. And if you want to support the channel, feel free to become a Patreon member or a YouTube member where you get additional benefits. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one, bye bye.